I've always been one of those that just, fake it till you make it type of people. Like I'll say, yes, I can do it before I actually know how to do it. Probably one of the biggest moments in my career was when I first met David Foster and he said, like, do you do Nessun Dorma? And I was like, yep. And I'd never sang Nessun Dorma for an audience ever. He had me do it in front of 12,000 people in an arena. And that was my first time singing it in front of an audience. When I stopped for a minute to catch my breath from chasing, I kind of took a step back and realized I don't need to keep chasing anything. I don't really have anything to prove. I missed my son growing up for the first 6 years of his life. Really, I was not here, and so I kind of finding that balance is important to me. And I don't want to, if I'm going to be gone, it better be for a good reason.
You recorded at Abbey Road Studios.
Yeah.
What was that like?
That was a dream come true. I still can't believe that happened. And we were there for 4 days. We had 2.5 days with the orchestra and a day and a half with the choir. And so we spent a whole week in London, and everybody that works there is just an absolute treasure. They know it's a big deal for you. Yeah. They go out of their way to make it special. And it was awesome.
He's a singer, president of a production company, baseball coach, a husband, and a father. I am, of course, talking about my guest today, Fernando Varela. Thanks for coming on today, Fernando. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. My pleasure.
I want to talk a little bit about Fernando the performer before we start talking about your other ventures, because you have a lot of stuff going on. You have gotten the stamp of approval from a lot of big names. Quincy Jones, Clive Davis, Barbra Streisand saw you perform, came up afterwards and said, "Kid, why aren't you at the Met?" Mm-hmm. Lionel Richie describes you as a brilliant singer who knows exactly where he's going. And of course, your friend David Foster says that you're his secret weapon. Those are some pretty big compliments from some pretty heavy hitters. Do you ever get overwhelmed by that or get starstruck or wonder what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, normally it takes a lot to get me nervous, but definitely Barbra Streisand, I definitely couldn't really say any words.
Right.
That was after we did I did a thing with David Foster at one of those Hollywood parties you hear about,
okay.
Where there was like 150 people there, but they were all like A-list celebrities.
Right.
And it was like a holiday party in Beverly Hills. And so we're done performing, and David comes like running across the room to me. He goes, "Barbara would like to see you." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, so, she's like gushing, and I'm just, I think it took me like a solid 30 seconds to say a word.
Right. Those situations happen and you're just like, am I dreaming? Is this actually happening? When you were growing up, you've gotten into, you do opera and you do some pop crossover stuff. When you were growing up, what were you listening to just for fun?
I mean, growing up, I listened to like hip hop, mostly hip hop, R&B, some pop. That was it. I didn't listen to any classical music. My only exposure to classical music was a CD of Placido Domingo that my parents had, but it was him singing all love songs. And that was the only exposure I had to any classical voice.
So has that changed both as you've gotten older and since you've been performing a lot, or?
I mean, I would just say my tastes have just gotten a lot more varied. I listen to a little bit of everything now. A lot of times though, when I'm, because I'm, if I'm having to learn a lot of music or, get ready for performance, a lot of times if I'm in the car, it's more like talk radio. I need to clear my head of music for a little bit because I'm, around it so much.
What's your go-to genre right now?
Lately we've been listening to a lot of like Broadway soundtracks. So everything from like Hamilton to like kind of older like Songs for a New World, Aida. Sometimes I'll just put my Spotify on just like it'll start playing suggested for you type stuff, right? And it is so eclectic. It'll be a hip hop song into a country pop song into like a Broadway tune into a classical piece into instrumental piano pop. So it's like it's really, Spotify's very confused by me.
Right. But that makes it fun. Do you ever find anything that you want to add to your playlist that way?
All the time. I mean, honestly, all the time. I will say that Spotify has a way of finding new things. I'm like, ooh, this is really good. I've never heard of the song. I've never heard of this artist.
Yeah, that I thought that would be an interesting thing to find out, kind of where you lean when you're not working. When you were growing up, before, I know you kind of really started when you were about 17, but when you were growing up and was there somebody you wanted to emulate? Did you want to be Elvis or one of the Beatles or something? Or, kind of what did you want to aspire to when you were a little kid?
I mean, when I was looking, I was really fascinated with Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5. So I would say like I gravitated towards like that kind of sound and that kind of feeling. I like how I felt when I was listening to the Jackson 5. It was very upbeat. It was very hopeful.
And they were good.
And they were good.
Do you listen to them quite a bit still, or?
I'll go back to it every once in a while.
When I was listening to your stuff, you have, even if in your heavier opera stuff that I heard, you have kind of a softer, mellower edge to your voice. Has that helped you or hindered you when you're trying to do different genres and things? Do you ever find that ends up being a tool that works against you?
No, I mean, I've always kind of gravitated to what has to move me. Like if I don't feel it, if I don't connect with it, I don't tend to perform it very long. So
okay.
We really go out of our way to try to find music that feels right, and especially nowadays where I can be a little more choosy on what projects I do and what I don't. If it's something I'm not feeling, I'll just decline it. I won't do it.
Do you have any particular pieces that when you got done, you're like, yeah, I'm never doing that again?
Yeah, I think when I was 20, I was on a cruise ship and I had to wear this ridiculous costume and sing Under the Sea from Little Mermaid.
Right.
I gave it my all. I definitely, and it was ridiculous. Every time I sang it, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to not have to do this anymore.
Is there any way we can find recordings or images of that for blackmail purposes?
That was 20 ago, before everyone had a camera in their pocket.
Oh man, that's funny. How about, performing so much and in so many places? What about memorization of lyrics and melodies? That's something as a musician that I have always struggled with, no matter how hard I work on it. Even if it's one of my own pieces, I'll get on stage and I'll just be like, yeah, I have no idea what this song is.
Yeah, I would say when I was younger, I could memorize stuff incredibly quickly, and part of it was out of necessity because I did a televised church service every week, 40 minutes of music, and it was new music every week. Got the music on a Tuesday and would have to memorize it by that Sunday. I did that gig for like 6 years. I got so good at it that I started challenging myself to see how short it would take me to memorize the music. I wouldn't look at the music until Sunday morning. I would learn it in the car, drive, because it was about an hour drive. I would learn it and memorize it in the car on the way to the service. And I think I did that for about the last year.
Did that ever bite you?
No.
Wow.
No. In fact, the only time it bit me was before I started trying to do that early on, before that muscle got really good. There was one time where I literally forgot what the melody was and what the words were. I couldn't for the life of me. And this is just like playing underscore, waiting for me to come in. It's televised, so it's not like, what are you going to do? So I literally made up a song and lyrics on television, and I sold it. It's one of those moments. If you're confident, nobody knows what it's supposed to sound like. So yeah, that was before I was pushing the boundaries of memorization.
When something like that happens, I mean, obviously you responded pretty well. That can be kind of a terrifying situation. Does that tend to affect the rest of your performance, or just be like, well, okay, I'm not doing that again?
I was terrified inside. I wanted to run. I've always been one of those that just, fake it till you make it type of people. Like I'll say, yes, I can do it before I actually know how to do it. Probably one of the biggest moments in my career was when I first met David Foster and he said, do you do Nessun Dorma? And I was like, yep. And I'd never sang Nessun Dorma for an audience ever. He had me do it in front of 12,000 people in an arena. And that was my first time singing it in front of an audience. And I killed it. It was great. But sometimes you got a deadline, and now you got to figure out how to do it.
It's interesting that you say that. I had a jazz artist who said that he always wanted to be a yes man. And I said, well, depending on where you're working, depends on the connotation that comes with. And he said, I wanted to be the type of yes man that if somebody said, can you do this? Yes, I can. That ended up getting him a really big gig where now he's ended up recording and producing with Dave Koz on several albums. So, being in that position, being able to pull that off, having the confidence to know that you can pull it off if you say yes.
I think a lot of opera singers are trained to be like, oh, well, I'm not ready to do that yet. You're trained to like think like this stuff is too big. Or had I thought that traditional way in that moment and told David Foster like, oh, sorry, I don't do that. Is there another, another song I can do? He just somebody else. He would have been like, okay, no, thank you.
What's the quickest turnaround you've had to pick something up when you said yes?
I'd say there's three. I've got three solid examples. It was a David Foster hit. I get a call the day before, and he asks me, we're going up to DC at the Kennedy Center with the National Symphony. Chris Bode is on the show. And so he goes, hey, I did this song with Bocelli and Chris Bode called Italia. Have you ever heard of it? I was like, no, I haven't heard of it. And he's like, all right, take a listen. We'll try it at soundcheck. Okay, great. So I'm listening to it, and it is not an easy melody to learn. It's almost like a trumpet melody, like not a singer's,
right.
And then it's in Italian, which is fine. I've learned a lot of stuff in Italian. So I just start pounding it, and then I get to sound check, and Chris comes up to me and asks me, he's like, hey, have you ever heard this song? I was like, oh no, David just told me yesterday. And he's like, wait, you just got the song yesterday? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh yeah, we're probably not going to do it in the show then. So we do the song sound check. David stops me in the middle and says, hey, I know you learned this line, but I think I had actually written it to go higher, and Bocelli didn't want to do it that way, so we changed it to this. But I would love to see if you can do what I originally wrote. So he gives me the line, and I again have to change what I've already learned. I do it, and he loves it. So long story short, we end up I do it with the higher line in the show. Chris Bode starts making all this noise, like he starts losing his mind in the middle of the song. I didn't know it was him. I thought something had happened, like. So that was a day. The shortest was in about 90 minutes before a show. David comes to me and he goes, hey, I did this song with Luis Miguel once. He gave it to me. He's like, I want to do like a verse and chorus of it. I'm like, okay. So literally learned it in 90 minutes. We ran it 5 minutes before we went on stage and went out there and did it. And then the last one was right when Lionel Richie put out his duets album. I was doing a gig with David. He calls me up. He's like, hey, guess what? Lionel Richie's on this gig. I'd never met Lionel at that point. He's like, you're going to sing a duet with him from his new album. I said, great. I said, which one, which song? And he goes, I don't know. Learn the whole album. I had about a week. So I did. I learned all 12 songs on that album. And then Lionel doesn't even show up for soundcheck. Literally the first time we do it is in the show live for the people. So
now I think I saw some footage of that.
Yeah.
And doesn't Lionel like turn to David Foster and say, who needs a sound check or something? Yeah. That had to be a little nerve-wracking.
That was nerve-wracking. That was nerve-wracking just because I would have liked to have spent the time working on the one song I knew that I was going to do as opposed to spreading him over 12 songs.
How familiar were you with Lionel Richie's material just by hearing it?
Yeah, I mean, I knew all the songs. It's learning the harmony, and it's like, and now it's a duet version. And most of the time, the duet people aren't on the, it's Lionel's on the melody, most of the time. Yeah, you're like learning harmony to a song that you already know the iconic moments of. So
yeah, I saw that clip and I thought, wow, that had to have just been terrifying. I know these songs, but I've not been able to sing with him, so I have no idea what's going to happen.
Well, if you rewatch it, watch the duet of "Stuck on You," you'll notice I came in early because I was so nervous, and in the moment I was like, "Wait, is there another time through the intro here before I come in?" I'm just gonna come in. Like David's at the piano, like he's just gonna follow me. But you'll see on Lionel's face, he like kind of like freaks out because it's like you aren't supposed to come in there, bud.
Has that ever happened in a performance where and the only reason I say that is because it happened to me once. And again, I had an amazing accompanist, or else it would have just been a total failure. I just happened to just skip right to the end of the song. Just skipped the whole verse. Luckily, the accompanist was able to figure out what I was doing. Nobody knew the difference. The song's a little shorter than I remember it, but
stuff like that's happened. But I always, when you're working with musicians that like they'll find you, they'll cover you. The only problem is when you're playing to stuff which we do a lot, you don't have a full orchestra and integral part of the song, you figure out that you're in the wrong spot as the singer because there is no band coming to rescue you.
Right.
In those moments for me, I'm like listening, be like, okay, clearly I'm not in the right spot here, and how can I now basically cut where I am to the right spot eloquently.
Did you end up getting a side eye or a comment from David after that, where he was like, "Wow, that was a challenge"?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't miss anything. So, I mean, there honestly, the funny thing, there was one time we were doing you Raise Me Up. We have two versions of You Raise Me Up. So one is with a 1 bar intro and one is with a 2 bar intro. He was on this kick where it had been the 1 bar intro for, I don't know, a couple years, right for the song, and he looks at me, he goes 2 bars. I'm like, okay. And again, I think I had just flown in, so I wasn't there at sound check. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, I guess they changed it for tonight. So I come in 2 bars. No, it was the 1 bar. And I quickly found out that we were on the wrong spot. So we covered it real easy, especially it was early in the song, so it was easy to cover. Yeah. Then afterwards, he was like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Well, and sometimes and I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but sometimes you don't realize that you've made a mistake until you see someone else respond to it.
Yeah.
When I had skipped that verse, I didn't even realize I had skipped it, except out of the corner of my eye, I see him flipping pages.
Yeah,
and I was like, oh, something's not right. I guess I screwed up.
No, I mean, for me, it's like, I didn't realize you made a mistake until, there's a chord that's early on in that song that's clearly kind of tells you that, it's a change. Yeah. And I'm like, oh crap, that came a little too early.
You recorded at Abbey Road Studios.
Yeah.
What was that like?
That was a dream come true. I still can't believe that happened. And we were there for 4 days. We had 2.5 days with the orchestra and a day and a half with the choir. And so we spent a whole week in London, and it was magical. I mean, that room sounds unbelievable. They have a little balcony up there where they record the orchestras. You can just sit in the room in the balcony and just like listen, and it's just ridiculous. And then the other studio where the Beatles recorded wasn't being used, so we were able to go in there and just kind of sit. We played a couple songs in there just for fun, and you could just feel the history, the incredible music that was created. Everybody that works there is just an absolute treasure. They know it's a big deal for you. Yeah. They go out of their way to make it special, and it was awesome.
I can't even imagine just being in that space, much less actually working in that space. So that's really cool. Have you gone back there since then, or?
It was at one session for my put out with Universal. I've gone over a couple times when some friends have been there, where I happen to be in London. So I've been back since, but not on one of my projects.
Gotcha. You do a lot of other stuff too. You're the founder and CEO of a production company, Victory Productions. But before we talk about kind of what that is, you have, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit, you have a do whatever, wherever, whenever approach to being able to continue following your passion. And I know that that's helped really hone your skills, and it's probably taught you a lot of humility. How do you hang on to that humility and focus?
It's a challenge, and I wouldn't say that I master it all the time. I do a pretty good job staying humble and grounded, and that's just really, my family helps me a great deal. My wife helps me a great deal. I've seen both great examples of really successful people that have stayed humble and grounded, and people that have not. I just don't ever want to fall in that category where I'm not. So it is a concerted effort just to kind of keep my feet on the ground. There's some days where, I was always busy. I think staying busy is good. It keeps you out of trouble. Since COVID, since that big, screeching, where everything came to a screeching halt, yeah. It's actually made me kind of reassess some of that, because I did enjoy being home. I enjoyed being with my family.
Gives you a whole different feel for what life can be.
It's almost like we all got unplugged, from the Matrix there for a little bit. And so, when I stopped for a minute to catch my breath from chasing, I kind of took a step back and realized I don't need to keep chasing anything. I don't really have anything to prove. It just caused me to be a lot more selective with what I do. Whereas before, I would just say yes to everything, and I would be on the road 200 days out of the year. I missed my son growing up for the first 6 years of his life. Really, I was not here. I went hard at this for 20 years. the last year and a half, what was more important to me was to be there for my son and coach his baseball team.
Hmm.
And a lot of my music just took the back seat, and the like I said, I was really selective with what I did. In fact, I even had a chat with David Foster of like, I turned down some touring opportunities with him because I'm like, I don't want to miss a baseball game.
Yeah.
And
How's
so
the team doing, by the way?
the team is doing great. We won the USSSA Elite World Series this summer. We got to the semifinals in the Perfect Game World Series. Won several tournaments, but the boys did really well. It was a fun summer. It was their last, the 12U season is like the last youth baseball season, and they moved to the big field at 13. They basically play on the same size field as the pros from there on out. So
That has to have been a blast.
it was awesome. It was memory. We went up to Cooperstown, and did that, which was a big rite of passage, and just a lot of fun. And I was happy, I was just happy to be there. To be able to look back and be like, hey, I prioritized that is going to be great, and I was there.
Yeah.
And so I kind of finding that balance is important to me, and I don't want to. If I'm going to be gone, it better be for a good reason.
Have you found that that's been has had a positive impact on your career across all of these different ventures?
It's made me a lot more content with my career and with where I am, because I'm not chasing a carrot anymore. It's changed my mindset of like, it's almost like when you're in that mode of just go, next record deal, next record, let's go promote this, let's go promote that. You lose sight of everything that you've done. I took a step back and I was like, wow, like I've accomplished a lot. I've done a lot. I'm proud of what I've done. I just don't feel like I need to prove anything. I'm going to do a handful of projects that I like, that I love, that I feel good about. I love performing with David Foster. That's part of my musical family. Like, we can be off for 6 months and then pick up where we left off. Right.
Yeah.
I'm working on a project for the United Nations, things like that, where I can put more time. I can concentrate on it, rather than it's like, oh, now I got to do this, and then I'm flying tomorrow to go do this, and then flying. With my last record deal, I flew to Germany once a month for 2 years. So I mean, I was there 2 weeks out of the month and fly back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I just don't know if I could do that anymore.
That led me to ask you something else. Now that you've changed gears, so to speak, do you think your work has gotten better because of that as well? Being able to be more selective, you don't have to push the limits so much. And
I mean, absolutely more rested. I'm working on music, but there's no major deadline. So I can spend, if I want to spend 2 years on this next project, I can spend 2 years. If I want to spend 3 years, I spend 3 years. Done whenever it's done, and I don't have to feel like I got to finish it by tomorrow. And we're lucky enough to have a recording studio right here in my office, like right on the other side of that wall. If there's something that needs to be recorded, I walk 10 paces and we go get it done.
That's got to be cool.
Yeah, it's great.
Have you ever found that allows for laziness to kick in, or is that just something that is not part of your personality? It's so different. You've got bands that have had huge success and are hard workers, and they suddenly get to a certain level where there's no limitations. They're like, I think we're just going to chill for a while. And then the project tends to lag and not get done when they would like it to.
Honestly, like, I'm still catching my breath. I went hard at this for 20 years. The last year and a half, what was more important to me was to be there for my son and coach his baseball team. And that was a conscious choice. So a lot of my music just took the back seat, and like I said, I was really selective with what I did. In fact, I even had a chat with David Foster of like, I turned down some touring opportunities with him because I'm like, I don't want to miss a baseball game. Or a lot of times I would take the red eye back from Vegas or LA so that I wouldn't miss it. So I get here at 6 in the morning. He might have a game at 8 in the morning. I was coming straight from the airport off a red eye to the baseball field. And I probably did that, I don't know, 10 or 12 times. So much of this career is sacrificing those moments. And I would say over the last, 23 years, I sacrificed a lot of Thanksgivings and Christmases. And I mean, I had a New Year's gig, every year for 20 years.
I think a lot of people don't realize, they celebrate the holidays and they've got all this entertainment as part of their celebration, and they never give a thought to the fact that the people who are providing that don't get those holidays.
Yeah.
Or they get the holidays 2 weeks later, when everybody else is done.
And I mean, you make the best of it. You learn to deal with it. The reality is, like, once you get to experience it again, you realize, oh man, this is, because when you're in the middle of it, you're like, oh, well, we'll just celebrate Thanksgiving on Wednesday,
Right.
We'll celebrate New Year's when I get home, but you can't replace those moments.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. And it's awesome that you've been able to go through some of these things now with your son. That's so cool. Let's talk about Victory Productions a little bit. You do concert promotions, you do live theater, you host special events. Everything that you make, you give a portion of to help underprivileged kids. So what's happening with that? How did that come about? And what all do you do? What is Victory Productions?
Yeah, I mean, we do concerts, variety shows, theatrical productions, audio visual. So everything from creating things from scratch and then promoting them to promoting big tours. Like when the Beach Boys, are touring, we'll promote some of their dates. We like to kind of focus on nostalgia. That's kind of our sweet spot here in Florida.
Is that a demographic influenced thing, or is that just something that you always kind of wanted to do, or both?
It's both. Yeah. I mean, as an artist, like I always want to make people feel something. And I think knowledge is probably the most powerful medium for that. Like, being able to have people think back to, key moments of their life. And there's all sorts of things you can do with that. So I started singing at 17 in the Villages, which is the largest retirement community in the world. It has just kept growing and growing and growing. But that's kind of where I cut my teeth as a singer. And so I was able to kind of, continue to provide programming and shows there as that community continued to grow. So it was a great opportunity as a producer and as a promoter. We've expanded outward from there. So we do stuff all over Florida.
How did you transition? Has this always been kind of in the back of your mind to do something like this? Or how did you transition being an entertainer to being, a CEO, a behind the scenes guy, a promoter and producer?
I've always been fascinated with business and an entrepreneur. And all it took was one time where I think a client called me that I worked with many times, and they wanted to book me for a show, and I was already booked. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm already booked, but let me know. I definitely would love to do it next time. And I hung up the phone and I was like, wait a second, why did I just say no? So I called them back and I said, hey, look, I'm not available, but I know like 5 or 6 guys that could come in and and do what you need them to do. They were like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah. So I helped them out. And then that just turned into, as you get better and as you start getting booked, that starts to happen all the time. So I ended up started booking other people. And then those clients come back and say, well, you did such a great job with this. Do you know any top 40 bands? My attitude of like, yes, I do. Let me get back to you. You start making some phone calls, and that's kind of how it all, that's kind of how it all turned out.
Being an entertainer for a while, though, probably helped give you a solid base of connectability and kind of understanding how it functioned.
I always say being an entertainer made me a better producer, and being a producer made me a better entertainer, because as a producer, I understood what it's like to be out on the road. And so I understand what is important to artists to make them feel comfortable, to make them feel valued, so they come and give you a great performance. I've also seen really bad examples of producers that treat artists terribly, and I've been on the receiving end of that. And not that I don't give a good performance. I'm a professional, so I'll still give a good performance, but it's a different feeling, and you want to get out of there as soon as possible. I started the company with that, of like artists first, like make sure we're, making the artists feel good and feel comfortable so that they want to come back. And, I was able to leverage a lot of my contacts and my relationships. So, I literally got the Beach Boys deal done. I was on tour with the Beach Boys. I'm going to get the Beach Boys to come to the Village for like 2 years. And just the agent just never got it done. So I literally just pulled Mike Love aside, and I'm like, hey, I know this is going to sound really weird, but besides being a singer. I'm also a promoter. I sent this offer to you for this place called the Villages. And he was like, oh, I remember that, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, we literally hammered out the details, like somewhere in Germany. We were in Germany somewhere. We like basically worked out the deal right there. And he's like, all right, send it, send the offer into the agent and I'll be waiting for it and I'll approve it. Literally, like, and so the agent calls me. She's like, I don't know what you did or how, but
sometimes having the inside scoop helps, right?
yeah, and we got Patti LaBelle the same way too. I sang with Patti, Gershwin Prize honoring the Estefans, and after the show, she wanted to talk to me like kind of like Barbara. She was like I'm like, oh my gosh, you're Patti LaBelle, and
yeah,
you're like one of the greatest voices of all time. Like, just stop. I was like,
yeah.
You're that good.
Yeah. No, isn't that awesome? That is so awesome.
And so I told her, I was like, it would be a dream come true to bring you to do a concert at this place. And she's like, absolutely. Here's, just call my manager directly and we'll work it out. And so we did, so yeah. It's helped, like I brought David Foster there many times, and the two, obviously it's a symbiotic relationship. So it's really helped, both sides of it.
Mm-hmm. Do you sometimes perform as well as producer of an event?
Very rarely. I try to keep them separate. I know a lot of people that stick themselves into everything, and I think that's just, I don't think it's a good look. I like giving the stage to other people and giving other people a chance. And I don't need to be creating my own opportunities. I'll do it occasionally, but as a rule, I really try not to.
And it is cool to be able to supply somebody with a platform and be able to see them do their art.
That's absolutely awesome. And I always joke, it's like, I can produce all these shows and then still be home for dinner. So right. That's the beauty of it. I can go take my son to baseball practice and the show's happening, and I don't necessarily always have to be there. So
yeah, there's a lot to be said for that, isn't there?
Yeah.
How do you work with, like, what charities do you work with, and how were you able to connect with that? Was that something that happened as the company progressed, or was that kind of in your plan from the beginning? How did that work?
So there were several moments. First off was our church was the one that the very first time I tried to produce something, they helped us do it financially. So we were just living paycheck to paycheck, and to put up a show, you need thousands and thousands of dollars, or you get that money back. You're the one having to put it all up. So that's how it started. So ever since then, we've helped our church with a lot of different projects that they do, mainly the backpack program that they spearhead. So since day one, we always give money to the backpack program to help those efforts. And then I was an ambassador for Child Fund for a while. So, we went to Ecuador and basically sponsored a village, helped build a school there, helped build, clean water and all sorts of kind of help lift that up. So, honestly, that's my wife's influence. I've always wanted to be philanthropic. And, early on I was like, oh, when we're rich, we'll do things. And my wife was like, we don't have to wait till we're like rich. We can start right now with just some little gestures. That they grew, and as we grew, we were able to do more. She spearheaded a lot of those initiatives, and we've been able to do a lot. We've raised over $1 million, and since we started, impacting not just places in Ecuador and international places, but also kids in our own backyard. We kind of sponsored a local school near the villages where we do a lot of our shows, and spearheaded after school programs and literacy programs and incentives. We cover the buses for them to go on field trips that they wouldn't go because they couldn't afford the buses.
Yeah, and that's great.
Lots of little things that ripple out and have a really nice ripple effect. So
yeah. Well, and some of those things you don't normally think about, like the buses.
Yeah, the school literally said if we don't have someone to cover the buses, we can't go, and that just breaks my heart. The buses were like $1,600. Like, it's not like we're talking about crazy money,
right? Yeah, but so many people are in a spot where those things have huge impacts.
Yeah.
So it's so awesome that you're able to help out on those things and help out on the things that people don't think about, the little stuff behind the scenes. You have a team behind you. How did you develop that team? And did you end up having a lot of people just come forward and go, hey, I'd love to be part of this? or did you kind of shop around, or do you already have people and you just mentioned, hey, I'm starting, just want to jump in with me?
Obviously started with kind of people that are close by. When we started this company in 2006, everything kind of just started happening so fast that it was kind of like we were just catching our breath just to keep up. All of a sudden it's like, okay, we need another person to help this. And, it's like, oh, I know somebody. And we were just having to move so fast. My technical director was one of my audio engineers. I was cool. In the studio with him all the time. And I'm like, hey, would you want to help us on the technical side, like advancing these shows and talking to the artists and talking to the venue and making sure that what they have or what they need is there. And he started that. And then as we got busier, it became kind of like a full-time gig. And he's been with me ever since, and then we've just picked up people like that as we've gone along.
That's great. We talked about all your baseball stuff there. We've talked about some of your business stuff. Do you have anything in the works? Because I want to talk about some of the projects you've got going on through your production company, but do you have anything in the works for new releases, new performances, tours that you're working on?
I'm working on some music. I'm also I started going through everything that we haven't released. So like the album that I released with Universal, while we released, 12 songs or whatever was on that record, I think we recorded like 36 songs. Oh, wow. And they're recorded and mixed. I think at last count, I had like 70 some songs that I've recorded that I haven't released. Part of me is, trying to figure out how do we release these? Does it make sense to put them together one by one? Do we release all of them? But there's not doing any good just sitting on a hard drive. So, right. And there's some good stuff. And that's, the good thing about that record deal is I own all of that material. So I can release that whenever I want.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and then just kind of, working on some new stuff as well and figuring out what that's going to be. Obviously, the music industry continues to change and evolve, and it's very different right now than it was in 2017 when my album came out. So, just trying to kind of figure out how best to do that.
Yeah. And you've got a lot of different stuff coming out of Victory Productions over the next couple months. Is there anything you want to or are able to share about stuff that's coming up?
Yeah, we've got some exciting. We have a world premiere theatrical show that we're producing called Moonshine and Mistletoe. It's a Christmas show. It's an Appalachian Christmas tale. So it's set up in the mountains, and it's beautiful, heartwarming, like very family friendly, nostalgic, kind of fits with everything we're doing. So we're excited for that. We've been casting for that. We've got a couple more rounds of auditions here, and then that show starts rehearsals in November. And then after the first of the year, we're producing the U.S. premiere of Sweet Dreams, which is the Air Supply musical. It's a new musical that we're hoping, get to New York, get to Broadway or off Broadway. So a good friend of mine, Justin Sargent, is one of the authors of that show, and it's we've got the permission of Air Supply. And
that's awesome.
So we're excited. So we're gonna, right after the holidays, we'll jump into rehearsals for that, and that opens in February. And that pretty much is keeping us busy, along with all the concerts we're promoting, and it's kind of the big season here in Florida, right? January through April when the weather's beautiful, and so that'll keep us pretty busy until next summer.
It's impressive and exciting to see how many different things you have going on kind of at the same time. That's really cool. Where can people find you to keep updated on this? And where would you kind of like to direct people to check out what you've already done and then to keep up on what you've got coming out in the future?
Yeah, they can go to my artist website is fernandovarela.com. When we start releasing new music, that'll be definitely rebranded on there and very prominent. And, any touring will be up there as well. And then victoryproductions.org will have all of our productions and theatricals and concerts. And between those two websites.
Man, this was a blast. And I know you've got a ton of other things going on. So thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Michael.